Hello and welcome to the Other Kind of Doctor podcast. My name is Gemma.
And my name is Gaia, and we are both on the journey of gaining a PhD.
A quick disclaimer before we start. We are in fact the academic kind of doctors.
Well, nearly doctors.
Yes, nearly doctors. But we're not your medical kind of doctors.
So if you do need medical attention, please contact your GP.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to this week's episode
Of the Other Kind of Doctor podcast.
Yes, obviously. What are we going to talk about, Gem?
Today, we've just actually finished our interview with Dr Beatrice Hayes. Really fascinating interview.
I really enjoyed it.
We learned so much. And what Beatrice was talking about was presenting your research like a pro, because we all have to do it at some point.
Unfortunately.
And Beatrice comes and gives some really useful practical tips I think everyone can implement into presenting their research.
So yeah, let's go to the interview.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, who is this?
Hayes.
Who have we got? Who's that third person? This is Dr Beatrice Hayes.
Hello. This is so
Doctor.
exciting. I know. 'Tis I, Dr Beatrice Hayes.
I'm looking at you through the thing of the microphone, so I see her like behind the screen.
How dramatic. Oh, you know, like when very, very rich widows go to their husband's
Exactly that.
funeral and they have like a kind of black mesh.
That's not
thing.
morbid at all.
But it's fashion. That's what it
That's
is.
fashion,
It's
hon.
wealth. It's unbelievable wealth. So yeah, I think that I'm gonna. Yeah, I feel like I've got my kind of widow vibes behind this mesh. I love it.
That is perfect.
So that's not actually what we're talking about today.
No.
What are we talking about, guys?
Not
We're
that.
talking about presenting your research like a pro.
Yeah.
You are the pro, Beatrice.
Yeah.
Thanks,
No,
guys.
but we're really excited to have you on. And I wondered if you can tell us a bit about you.
Not your
Alright.
favorite color, more like what you do.
Yeah.
Also your favorite color if you want.
Okay, this is going to be the easiest thing ever. What do you think my favourite colour is?
Pink.
Correct. And that's why I was invited on this podcast. Friendship like that. I love it. Yeah, cool. So my name is Dr Beatrice Hayes and I'm a teaching fellow within the Department of Psychology at Royal Holloway. And I completed my PhD in 2021. So I did my viva in 2021. And my PhD research was all to do with children and adolescents, but mainly children's social media use, particularly around the risks, the benefits, and sort of perceptions around the risks and benefits. And my research now, I'm still interested in that, but I'm more interested in kind of emerging adults, so university students aged between kind of 18 and 24, particularly around their online communication, their online self-disclosure. So yes, as a sort of overview, my interests are very much to do with online communication and the digital age. So that's kind of my research.
Wow, you sounded so
Vibes.
competent.
You
I've
did.
said that so many times in so many settings. You just get used to like having your little like elevator pitch. That's basically my elevator pitch. That's just like bish bash bosh. This is what I do.
That sounded great.
It did sound great. And that's how we know each other. So Beatrice and I are in the same lab group because our supervisors are the same. Well, I'm like Beatrice 2.0 in our lab, as in Dawn Watling is my supervisor, but she was also Beatrice's supervisor before.
And I'm just there.
Gaia's just there. She's got nothing to do with us.
No.
God, just is here for the ride. She's having a great time.
Just vibing.
Vibing all day, a day.
So today, obviously, we're talking about presenting your research. We've invited you on because we've seen you talk a lot. No offence, but in
Thanks,
different
me.
in different contexts, and you are just really good at presenting your research. But we kind of want to take you back again.
A rewind.
How was your first experience presenting your research? So think back to maybe your first year of your PhD. What was that like?
You know what? Full on trigger warning for me, you asking that question. I'm like, the minute you said that, I was like, I can tell you exactly the first time I presented my research. It was in my first year, or just at the end of my first year, so like going into my second year of my PhD. And I presented at, so it was the British Psychological Society Developmental Psychology Conference. And it was the first time I'd presented my research to like an academic audience. I I'd done like mini, I wouldn't really call them presentations, but I'd spoken to like other PhD students about my research. I'd done something called Cake Club, which you guys obviously know about, but it's like a very informal way of telling your peers about your research. But this conference was my first time properly presenting, and I was absolutely terrified. I was so nervous, and there was a keynote that was on before my talk.
Oh, pressure.
No.
Pressure. Literally, it was day one of the conference, opening keynote, and the first like section of talks, mine was like the first one.
It gives me anxiety.
It was literally, it was like, I was like the opening act essentially for like the normal talks. And I was sat there in this keynote, and it's such a shame because the person who gave the keynote is a really nice guy and his research is so interesting, and I would have totally benefited from listening to it. But I did not listen to it. I literally sat there and rehearsed my talk in my head. And it was a 15-minute talk. This was an hour keynote. So I like rehearsed it in my head like 4 times. I kid you not. And I went into that presentation, into that talk that I gave, and I just like did it. But it went really, really well. It was great.
Oh, surprising.
I freestyled some of it, and it was actually, it went really, really well. But the nerves going into that, I don't think I've felt like, other than my viva, I don't think I felt nerves to that level. I was terrified.
Wow.
Going on from there, how did you develop all the confidence that you have now?
So it's a kind of a combination of things, kind of going way, way back. When I was in school, I did public speaking and debating. And throughout, particularly secondary school, I did a lot of debating. I did public speaking competitions. I competed like nationally. It was a big hobby of mine. And that absolutely helped with public speaking tips and tricks, I would say. And then I've done a lot of activities, and I've been involved in a lot of things throughout my life where I've had to speak in front of people in some way. So, for example, when I was at university, I was the president of the Dance Society. So when we had like our shows, and even just in like dance classes or at rehearsals, I would have to stand in front of like the whole society and say, even if it was just like, "Hi everyone, welcome to today's rehearsal," or something. I just got used to kind of speaking in front of lots of people. And then I was a primary school teacher, so I was literally public speaking every day because I had a class of children. So I was constantly talking to groups of people then. So I think it's definitely like practice is my key thing here. It's being in situations and scenarios where you have to speak in front of people, and even if it's only a small group of people, it's still people that you're speaking in front of. And genuinely, I'd say it's practice. It's just practice. It's just familiarity with doing that. And now I don't really get nervous at all when I give talks. I genuinely don't really get nervous at all because I've done it so many times. And part of my role now is I lecture. You know, I gave a lecture this morning, and it was a first year module. Yeah, it was a first year module. So there was, you know, the entire cohort there. So the confidence it's 100%, and I'm a big believer in this, of fake it till you make it. Fake it, practice it, rehearse it, put yourself in situations where you have to keep doing it, and then it gives you that confidence. You just accrue it over time. So yeah, that's like the overview.
Yeah, one of the following questions was, do you still get nervous? But apparently no.
It depends.
I've seen you profusely sweat one time.
When was that?
PsychFest. Might have been the fact it was like 40 degrees.
I was literally oh my God, it was so hot. It was so, I'm not a summer person. I was not put on this earth for summer.
She's ginger.
I'm pretty, I've got auburn tones. Thanks, Gaia. I've got auburn tones. I was sweating. Yeah, I definitely get I get adrenaline. And this, I'm going to save this point because you may ask me a question later on that will link to this. I get adrenaline, but I don't consider that necessarily nerves. But there are certain situations where I do get nervous. There are certain situations where, there are times when I still get nervous, but usually I don't. It's unusual now for me to get nervous with public speaking.
Why do you think it's important to be able to deliver talks confidently as researchers and PhD students?
It's really important because it's the best way of getting your research, or not even necessarily your research, but something that you are doing across to people. Obviously, with research, you write empirical papers, you write blog posts, you write articles, you do all these things for the scientific community, but also for public consumption. And that's great. You need to do that. That's really good. But talks are such an important and effective way of getting your key findings or getting your kind of take-home points across to people in such a more digestible fashion. Even like top scientists and like professors will skim empirical papers. Like they won't necessarily, unless they've got a real invested interest in your research area, they're probably not going to read your paper that deeply. And doing talks is such a great way of getting that key information across, especially if you've got really important findings. And then in terms of the non-academic community, particularly in terms of like communicating with the public and dissemination, you know, the majority of people haven't got PhDs. They're not going to have a clue what your results section says. And so being able to go to an event and make science and make your findings more palatable to the public is really important. Again, especially if you're doing research in an area that's really important and where the impact of your findings could be potentially like groundbreaking. You know, someone who is an ordinary person living an ordinary life could really benefit from your findings. That person's not going to read an empirical paper, but they will watch your talk on YouTube or something like that. So being able to clearly get that information across is important for all the audiences that you communicate to. And it's important for yourself to give your research justice and to give it space. So yeah.
How do you prep for these talks? One thing I noticed is you always have a very cute outfit. I was wondering if that was part of it. But in general, how do you prep for them?
I just wake up like that.
Oh, yeah.
I was just born this way, guys. I'm like, oh my God, I'm color coordinating. Legit, that's part of it. 100%. You've got to feel good. You've got to feel the way that you present yourself. It's not armor necessarily, but it's kind of like it gets you into the zone and it gets you into a frame of mind. And I'm a big believer that clothing and presentation is a really important way of how it links with my research, because I also do a lot of research on online self-presentation and that kind of thing. But the way that you present yourself is very much aligned with your goals and like what you want to achieve. So for example, when you go to work, you'll dress a certain way because you want to look professional or because you've got certain professional goals in mind. So if you're giving a talk and you're going to be in front of people, you want to make a good impression. You want to dress in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Why did I go northern then? You want to dress in a way that make you feel comfortable. When I'm in fields, I wear me boots because I feel comfortable.
Listeners have turned off the...
I have no idea what happened there. Literally changed region. You want to be dressed in a way that you feel comfortable, but you feel confident in.
Yeah.
And if you feel that you look good, I just feel like you're immediately going in there with a good energy, and energy is like super important. Like you want to go in there feeling good, ready for the talk. Also just knowing your environment and knowing your audience. If you're doing like, I don't know, say for example, okay, let's say you're going to a school and you're giving a talk to A-level students. Don't go into that talk with the same energy that you'd go in for like an academic talk in front of professors, because you're going to have to be meeting that audience at a completely different angle.
Yeah.
So I think knowing your audience, kind of understanding or thinking about what they're going to want to achieve from going to that talk, I think that also really helps to kind of get you in the right mind frame, like getting in like the mindset of a talk. I think makes it a lot easier to then go and kind of deliver it, because you're sort of already in that space, you're already in that zone, and the way that you dress is part of that. So yeah, I think just kind of really feeling comfortable, feeling confident in myself, knowing my audience is kind of the first thing that I do, like to get myself in the mind frame when I'm about to give a talk.
Nice.
I love that. It actually links to when I first presented my research, was at the British Psychological Society Developmental Conference, and Beatrice, I was actually sharing a room with Beatrice at the time.
It's true. We had a
sleepover. And I remember the morning of my talk, I was saying to Beatrice, what shoes should I wear?
Yeah. And I was like, what you feel comfortable in. For the love of God, do not wear something, or don't pretend to be something that you're not. Yes, fake it till you make it, in terms of like, be confident, just like push through, like you know you will be fine, but you've got to be yourself, and you've got to present as yourself, because that's when you feel the most comfortable, when you're in your own skin and you're doing your own thing. And often the reason why we get nervous when we do talks and we present is because we have imposter syndrome. We feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know, like they're going to know that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to get it wrong. A, that's not true. But B, if you're comfortable in how you're presenting and what you're doing and what you're wearing and where you are, that helps with that, because you don't feel like you're playing another character, like you're just being yourself. So you can't be an imposter if you're just being yourself. So that helps.
So knowledgeable.
You're so knowledgeable. Every show is
such a wise gal.
So something that actually links to our brain bites, which we're going to be doing after this discussion. But is it helpful to picture the audience naked?
Absolutely not. Whoever came up with that obviously had deep issues and should be in therapy. The whole like picture your audience naked thing is such rubbish. I'll give you a much better tip. When you feel nervous and your anxiety's going a bit, you've got the sweaty palms, your heart's starting to go, your mouth is getting dry, and all of these things, that's adrenaline. And put yourself in the mindset of, rather than going, oh, I'm so nervous, I don't want to do this talk, I'm so nervous, think, okay, my adrenaline's pumping. Because that is actually what's happening. And that's because you're getting prepared. Your body is preparing you to talk, to stand in front of people, to deliver this information. So rather than thinking I'm nervous, just think, cool, my body's getting me ready. My body's getting me prepped. And actually that's really important, because it means that when you're stood there giving your talk, you're going to be thinking more quickly. You're going to be processing information more quickly. People are going to ask you questions and you're going to get the answer quicker, because your body's kind of like the adrenaline's pumping. So you're going to be moving, thinking a bit faster, as long as you can calm down how fast you speak, because a classic is
that is something I do. I talk 100 miles an hour and it's really bad.
Slow that bit down. But if you view your body as helping you, rather than I'm nervous, that is the best tip I can give. View it as adrenaline. Your body is helping you, you're getting prepped, and that's actually a good sign. It means that you're pumped and you're ready for it.
That's such a good point.
Such a good point.
Same if you want to fight a bear.
Precisely.
Do not fight a bear.
Don't fight a bear. Or give the talk first and then fight the bear.
Yes.
Follow it up with a bit of bear fighting.
So that kind of links to kind of what you said earlier about questions after a talk. They're really scary, especially for someone new to presenting. I remember the first time I presented my research, I was like, they're going to ask me questions I have no idea about. All of these really fancy professors are going to be quizzing me and telling me off for doing something wrong. How do you answer these questions, and what do you do if you don't have an answer?
This is the ultimate fear, I think.
Play dead.
Yeah, play dead. Or then let the bear in. Let them fight the bear. Don't fight that bear. Let them fight the bear. By the way, no bears were harmed in the making of this podcast. I don't support bear fighting or anything like that.
That's going to be in the audiogram that goes on social media.
Don't fight a bear, please. I was just thinking, where would you find a bear in the UK? But that's not the point. So I think questions are the thing that, I think other than imposter syndrome in terms of like, I don't know what I'm talking about, they're going to know that I'm an imposter, which is not true. And everyone struggles with that no matter what point in your career you're at. Other than that, I think questions is the thing that people get most scared about. Firstly, most people, I can't swear, most people aren't unpleasant. Most people don't want to trip you up or catch you out or make you look like a fool. That's not what most people want to achieve, right? When someone asks you a question, it's often because there's something they want a bit of clarification on because they just zoned out or forgot or wasn't quite sure what you said, or it's because they're interested and they want to know more. That's genuinely, like, if you think about it, when you're at a talk and if you ask a question, those are the two reasons why. So I think knowing people's motivations behind it can ease the nerves around questions, because you're like, they're not trying to trip me up, they just want to know more. And half the time, like, this is your research, you have done this, so you do know the answers. Or you can think, well, I'm not 100% sure because that's not totally aligned with my research. However, I did read this paper that said da 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 da. Or, however, if I think about the link from my research in this sense, then I could say da 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 da. And that's completely fine. If someone asks a question and you really don't know the answer and you're really, really not sure, for the love of God, don't try and blag your way through it. That is the worst thing you can possibly do. And I've been at talks before where someone's clearly tried to, like, blag their way, and it makes you wince. It's like, don't blag, because it's obvious that you don't know the answer, and no one's expecting you to know the answer to everything. Like, that's the whole point of science, right? Is that we're building upon knowledge. We're always learning. If you don't know the answer, a classic is just to say something like, that's a really good point, I hadn't thought about that. I haven't really got time now, but can we have a chat about that afterwards? Or if someone is being a little bit annoying and they are pushing a question and you're like, maybe this person is slightly unpleasant, just stroke their ego a bit. It's what I've done before. So I'll just say something like, that's a really good point, I hadn't really thought about that. Like, you clearly have quite a lot of understanding on this, so could I grab you afterwards just to have a chat? It's basically your way of saying, shut up, sit down and fight the bear. We need to leave this bear. We need to leave this bear thing alone. But yeah, most of the time, that kind of response, like, if you don't know, oh, that's really interesting, thank you for that, I need to think a bit more about that. Could we grab a coffee after this and have a chat? And then it just shuts them up.
Such a good way of saying that.
Yeah.
Shuts them up, then you can move on to the nice question.
I would have just cried. So, final question, are you ready?
Oh, I'm enjoying myself. I don't want this to end. I'm loving this.
I'm sorry.
Aww.
Do you think presenting during your PhD helped you during your viva?
100%. Oh my goodness, you have to practice before your viva. Practice and practice. Also, before your viva is such an intense experience where you're talking about your research that you've been doing for like hours. If you've never done that before, it's really difficult to do. Like, the reason why at the beginning of this podcast, when you were like, oh, talk about yourself, and I was able to just rattle off a script, like, because I've done it so many times. And so in my viva, it was just as easy to summarize, and it also just helps you to talk about your research and to talk about it in a way that clearly gets the meaning across and gets the kind of clarification across. If you're doing anything that's conceptually quite dense, talking about it and presenting it helps you to figure out better ways of articulating yourself. Also, it's a great way to get other people's like thoughts and opinions. I've been at talks before when I've said something, someone's asked me a question, or they've just made a comment and gone, oh, had you thought about doing it like this? And I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. Like, it's really helpful getting feedback. And that ultimately improved my thesis, so that by the time it got to my viva, I would rather have that feedback at a talk than in the middle of my viva.
Yeah.
And then turn around and be like, good point, can we hit pause? Like, I'd rather hear that beforehand. But again, it just helps you to talk about your research and articulate it. And the thing you have to remember is, even with your examiners, one of my examiners literally read my thesis in one sitting. He literally said, I sat down with like a cup of coffee and just spent the day and I read your thesis. And he was like, it was so interesting, I didn't want to put it down, blah, blah, blah. And there was also he literally read it.
I want someone to say that about my work.
He literally read it in one go, which is great, which is lovely. But also it's because when I submitted my thesis to when I had my viva was there was a really short gap in between. Like, it was literally, I think it's like 3 weeks between. Yeah, it was super quick. So he didn't have loads of time to read it anyway. But my point is, as lovely as that is, he's only read it the once. So there are certain concepts, or there were certain links that I made, or certain things that I did in my analysis that he would have skimmed over. And so when he was asking me questions about certain things, I needed to make sure that I really clearly articulated, because there were some things that like he kind of said, and I was like, oh, that's not quite what I meant. What I meant was da 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 da. So you have to remember, your examiners, they don't necessarily know your thesis that brilliantly, or they may have read it 1,000 times but still have misinterpreted something. You need to be able to clearly articulate and explain to make sure that you address their misconceptions, or that you can explain or counteract something that they say that you disagree with. The more that you present, the better you will get at doing that. And like I said, you want to strengthen those skills during minor sort of stressful events compared to developing those skills in the middle of your viva. So it really does help.
Being able to explain research concisely as well. Something I really struggled with when I first started, when I presented research, was I just waffled, and I ended up not getting my point across properly. And I think when you, like for example, I've done a 5-minute talk before and things like that, like you do the 5-minute thesis. So be able to explain points in a really concise, obvious way is better. And I think that comes with practice, doesn't it?
So true. I mean, like, I can talk.
Really?
I can. I can talk.
And lots of different accents, apparently.
In many different countries. But, like, yeah, that's so true. Like, you need to be able to concisely get your information across. And you want to be able to do that before your viva. You don't want to get into your viva and then be waffling and be complicating, overcomplicating, causing like worry and them thinking, oh, do they really understand like what they've done? When actually you do, you're just not used to talking about it.
Wow, this has been such an interesting episode. Just to summarise, what would be your top tip for people who are nervous about presenting their research?
I basically gave this advice to someone literally a few weeks ago, and they found it so helpful. They were going in for a job interview and they actually got the job. They were really, really happy. So my advice is pause, slow down. If you're nervous, as I said earlier, firstly, just kind of identify those nerves as adrenaline. Get your mindset in that space. And then when you're actually stood there, in your mind, everything's going at like 1,000 miles per hour. So you think that you're talking at like a normal pace, but you're talking really, really quickly. Slow down and practice so that you're talking at a slower pace. And the more you practice doing it, the better you'll get at being able to slow yourself down and pause. If you're nervous, pause. In your mind, your pause is like a minute long. To the audience, you've literally paused, like they probably hadn't even noticed that you've paused. Have a bottle of water. So if you're, if you need to pause and take a sip of your water. No one's going to go, oh my goodness, what are they doing? It's been ages. If you're having a sip of water, no one's going to think anything of it. Slow down. And honestly, that will benefit the clarity of your talk, but it will also benefit how you're feeling. Because if you're physically slowing down, you're going to slow down that heart, that racing heartbeat, that you're going to slow down all of those feelings. Slow down. That's my ultimate tip if you're nervous. Just slow down and pause. It sounds super simple, but seriously, it really helps.
That's such a good tip. So
I'm going to practice that.
Yeah.
Seriously, you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. Like, it's like, oh yeah, obviously slow down and pause. Like, obviously, practice it. Because seriously, like, the better you get at it, the more you just do it naturally.
I've heard someone say when they did a TED talk that in like preparation for that, they had to, like the public speaking experts told them to practice in slow motion.
Yes.
So then when you end up getting to the talk and you've got that adrenaline and then you think that you're practicing in slow motion, then you end up talking at a normal pace.
Funnily enough, so yeah, like when I used to do my public speaking, we used to practice to what are those things called? Metronome?
Metronome, yeah.
Is that right? Like that. Yeah, get one of those. So you can get them on just Google it, and you can get like the sound on Google and practice talking to the beat of the metronome, whatever it's called. And as you practice doing that, you'll start to naturally do it when you actually do your talk.
Oh.
Because you'll, in your head, you'll assign like words to them. Obviously, don't speak like that, because people will think there's something wrong with you. But like, just practice like with that in the back of your head, and it helps to kind of just slow you down a little bit.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah.
Wow. So where can people find you, Dr. Beatrice Hayes? Not your house, as in online.
Please don't come to my house. Like, that would be terrifying. So you can find me on Twitter. My handle is at Dr. Beatrice Hayes. Revolutionary, I know. And yeah, you can follow me on there. You can find me on LinkedIn. Guess that's it, really.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Oh.
Yeah.
Go follow Beatrice.
Go follow me.
Follow Beatrice. Well, thank you so much.
That was really fun.
That was really fun.
I so enjoyed this. This is so much fun. I've loved it. Thanks so much for having me. And like, yeah, I hope that everything that I've said has been helpful.
Oh, so helpful.
Aw.
Yes.
Yippee.
And you're going to
Yay.
be famous soon.
Can't wait. Me, Molly May, we're just going to be hanging out, you know, having a good time.
Brain bites.
Brain bites. This week actually leads on from literally what Beatrice was talking about. And we tried to find some research to see if it actually is helpful to picture your audience naked.
So the short answer is no.
No. Like
And-
Beatrice said.
Yes. I don't know if she read this research, but it's basically exactly what she said. The more helpful way to calm your nerves, not even calm your nerves, just give a good presentation, wouldn't be to picture your audience naked, but just to reframe your anxiety as something helpful, as excitement.
Yeah, and the research has actually shown that people who do this perform better than people who actually try to calm themselves down. Like Beatrice said, reframe your nervousness into excitement. You'll perform better than if you try and calm yourself down. And something that a neuroscientist called Christian Jarrett said is that being an effective presenter is about respecting and engaging your audience. But if you're picturing them naked, you're kind of seeing them as the enemy or mocking them, and doing that isn't going to help your nerves at all.
So yeah, be excited and fight the bear.
Yes. Okay, so that's everything for today's episode. We learnt lots about presenting your research like a pro, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at @doctor_pod.
Yes. And please don't forget to subscribe on your chosen podcast platform. Leave a review if you're enjoying these podcasts, because that really helps us. And as always, thank you so much to our lovely podcast team and the doctoral school at Royal Holloway for supporting this podcast.
Bye.
Bye.